Alright, welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here. Yeah, whatever. In this package of observations. That's really all I can say about this part of my brain. When I'm doing this thing, I'm really just trying to explain what I see, in the world. How I add it up, how I identify the numbers, and then do the simple little bit of math required to recognize that this isn't a great idea. That this plan does fail to run a profit, and that the losses are really, really obscenely horrible, and makes us quite evil, frankly, for not stopping it as soon as possible, because it's all just squandered and wasted suffering, and that's just such an evil thing to squander. But whatever, torture without a productive purpose. So that's what this video is about. Just putting in the observations in order of their importance, which is sort of the tricky part. But it's sort of the interesting part in terms of trying to think about what you have to figure out first before you can figure out whatever you have to figure out last. How you can defend something more completely because you have all the pieces to the puzzle, versus just leaving it to a bunch of vague conclusions without any supporting argument. Something like that. So anyway, play the video, and strange in the sense he titled the paper Famine Affluent. Alright, so I started just because I'd seen in one of the recommended videos some Peter Singer thing, and I kind of know him as an animal rights advocate, I guess, and I remember I think it was Singer was having a conversation with Dawkins, and he was trying to explain to Dawkins how animals feel and that their suffering is important, and it was just, it was almost so stupid. You're just like, this is ludicrous. You mean Dawkins has to have it explained to him that brains are a feature of evolution, and that lots of other brains besides human brains are capable of manifesting sensations? I mean, that has to be explained. That was just kind of bizarre. And, Dawkins wasn't really having any of it. I mean, he really just didn't want to hear that, oh, you mean there's some ethical obligation I have to animals? I mean, he was entertaining it like, oh, yeah, that could be a possibility. Yeah, it might be a truth. It was just so pathetic. Anyway, so that's the initiating point, I suppose, for the video. Path to figure out how you balance the values. So there's some conversation about, I should remember his name now, right? Well, whatever his name is. The value landscape guy. I just keep calling him that. Geez, it's just so funny how, age just does ruin your brain. In terms of it just can't find things that it should be able to find quite easily. But anyway, so the whole idea of the origins of value, and so I guess that would be the point is one of the key observations is first that you have a brain. The brain is creating whatever you are, the me, and that the me is feeling, and that the feelings are important. That's obvious. They say it loud and clear. Any entity that samples a feeling, okay, especially a decidedly negative one, is definitely going to know that that's the kind of thing you don't make any more of. That's not a good thing. You got to stop that from happening. And so that's a simple observation, being a participant here in the living realm. And yet it's an observation a lot of people just can't figure out. I mean, they just haven't gotten there yet, where that they recognize that the essence of their being is really just a sensing, feeling organ. and that how it feels is the origin of value, that there's no other thing in the universe that has value except the welfare of the feeling things. That's all that matters. How are the feeling things doing? How everything else is doing just couldn't make any difference. Physical condition and our mental disposition. So just explaining, yes, that's the nature of our experience, is these moods or state of being or quality of our physical health, or however you want to describe it, but that we can manifest extremely unpleasant noise in our head. Things of how to live. There are warlords and all these other kind of... Alright, so now I'm sort of making the argument. Singer wrote a paper in the 70s about how we're obligated to be charitable. And, frankly, I think it's a little superficial, because our obligation is to be productive. And often charity isn't productive. You're feeding the machine that will create more harm in the future. Helping women have babies is never a good idea. You could argue, and it's certainly a really bad idea in countries where the babies are going to be programmed to be little monsters, little Allah-loving, sword-waving kooks. Really bad idea to feed that monster. This manifestation of consciousness is not, it's only temporarily your possession. Yeah, so a little bit in just the idea that, well, first, the future is much bigger than the present. I really didn't emphasize that enough. I mean, I brought it up, but I didn't really talk about the fact that everything we do, if we're going to be productive, has to be measured based on its long-term impact. What it does in the short run, greasing the wheel that's manufactured poorly, doesn't mean anything if there's going to be $1 billion worth of grease you have to use in the future, because you never made it right in the first place. You didn't spend the extra $10 to make it right in the first place, and then you spend $1 million later because of that poor choice. All of that's really important stuff if you're going to do any of this calculating for exactly how it all adds up and do the math. And so the math has to include the future. If you're just doing math for the short run, it's not likely to be good math, I guess, is the argument. I can't remember his name. The moral landscape guy. Yes, yeah, I can't remember his name again. Oh, that is funny. I mean, it's not that complex a name. It's just kind of funny that it's just... I'm reaching for it, and it's just not there. And there's just no reason for it not to be there. I mean, there's just no good reason. I mean, I'm familiar enough with the character. I mean, I haven't paid much attention to him in the last few years, especially after the Benatar interview where he just made a fool of himself, I think. And the very fact that he had kids, knowing that that's just psychological crapola. I mean, that's just falling into such a silly psychological trap. And you're just saying, why would he step in that mess? I mean, there's just no good idea there. What is, you're jumping right into a big nepotism trap, and on top of that, you're jumping into a circumstance where the world is shit. The whole plan that the human beings are living by is broken. Nothing's working very well. Why the fuck would you, this doesn't make any sense at all for a smart person to do something that stupid. The philosopher to be named later. Yeah, just, it's funny. My brain wants to say Alan for some stupid reason. I know that ain't right. Whatever. More relief, so to speak. But that gets into another observation, okay, that, yeah, really what you're playing for is the get rid of the negatives. Because if you get rid of the negatives, you basically... So this is the Benatar asymmetry argument, and really it's the argument, the zero-sum argument I would make, that you're really just climbing out of the mess. You're never really going anywhere good. You're just getting out of bad. And that all the real goods that we could describe are really goods only because we don't have cancer, or we don't have this, or we don't have that, or we don't have some other blight or fetter or problem. And that's the part where you win. When you don't have a problem is when you are winning. When you're doing good. So there's no real good. There's just eradication of the bad. And that's a sad truth of our existence. And that you get this few seconds worth of an experience. Alright, so yeah, I'm just trying to talk about this. So I concede that maybe orgasms or some other silly thing might be in the real category where you don't need a negative to create the positive, but I would still argue that you do. But even if I conceded those points and gave you, just gave you away a few points and just said, okay, you can have these points where there's a few tiny little circumstances where the good is actually not made out of the eradication of a bad, it's still such a tiny percentage of the equation that it can't make any difference. Behavior people behave as. And we become addicted or attached or even... So then I did a bit on nepotism and, that whole psychological corruption. So it's really a conversation about the fact that we have these, impulses and instincts, so to speak. We have these conditioned responses. We have these mimicking behaviors. We have these cheap passions that basically turn us into hypocrites and, frankly, duplicitous hypocrites, in terms of trying to defend positions that are really illogical and indefensible. And the whole argument that your parents are more important than my parents, or that your kids are more important than my kids, or any of those kind of notions are really silly and stupid, and there's no real ruler or anything's being measured against. And it's just a huge, giant subject of emotional cheat, and it shouldn't have any place at all as being a logical idea that anybody should be devoted more attentively to their own children than to any child they see. I mean, it should be, if you think they're worth something because of the properties they have, not because you own one. That's not a good standard for how you apportion resources. That could be the fault. All the children need a happy birthday. Just a fact. Fault of bad planning in terms of its creation. But the fact is, something about that might be a little bit about God and blah, 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 but I'm not exactly sure. I guess I could just play more of it. Is that all the properties it has. Okay, so I'm really talking about a kid. And the fact that all of them need to have a well-planned future, and they all need to be designed and engineered to be civilians and to be productive and to have, the ambitions to be something productive and contributing and all of that kind of crap, and they all need all of that. And it's just bullshit for people to sit there and say, oh, I just take care of my little circle. Well, that's not doing your job, frankly, as a human being. It's falling way short of your obligations. If I was to write the paper, there's an ethical obligation, if you're going to try to defend yourself as being productive, for you to account for all of these things. Power to help as effectively as possible. I mean, if you were going to pick a charity or something, you'd try to pick one that... Right, so if you're going to pick a child to invest in and to, expend resources on, you should be doing it based on, the fact that it shows some glimmer of potential, rather than, oh, it's mine. So no matter how broken it is, I'll try to make it work. When, yeah, the money is better, the resources are better devoted to one that you can actually make work. You don't fix a broken toaster. A kind of monster, and the two aren't going to be compatible. The bigger, better truth they learn later won't be compatible with the lifestyle. So just something about the fact that unfortunately we acquire these insights, these observations, these things we get to see. We don't see them in the right order, and so we have to constantly re-engineer the perception to recognize the fact that something that looked like it was real wasn't, like a plastic bumper versus a metal bumper on a car or something. One can look like something, and then oh, wait a minute, that's plastic, and so you can't bang it into something, you can't dent it with a, blah, blah, blah. You understand its limitations are different than what you thought they were, and so now you have to, say, well, you can't drive above 30 miles an hour or the car will be totaled. Something like that. Humans should be further up the staircase than this. That we still have to have. Yeah, so I think this was basically having a conversation about the right to die and different things. You know, that these subjects are so simple and so obvious, and the very fact that we still can't even get there, you know, it is a struggle to drag the human race, you know, up the intelligent staircase, and because they don't want to go. Because frankly, the staircase, every stair we climb now, none of them are redeeming, in the sense that none of them make humans look good or make them look important or make them any of that kind of crap. And really all the stairs are basically saying that no, we're really selfish monsters. We've done the animals very poorly. We've, you know, abused and exploited and cheated everywhere we can. And so they don't want to climb the staircase, because the higher you go, the more you see just how ugly we really are. The mirror gets clearer and clearer, and we can see the real image of the human being, and he is a fucking monster. Stupid and shitty. You know, and that's why they don't want to do it. But they will have to do it, because that's just the obligation of intelligence. How I vote, so to speak, would make me. So there's a huge difference between what you know to be true and what you say, and then what you do in your life. So you can be a hypocrite, you can be selfish, you can be all these kind of things, but you really shouldn't defend it as a way of life. So go ahead, be a hypocrite, be duplicitous, cheat, do all that kind of stuff, but don't talk absolute shit trying to defend those negatives. Yeah, that's just bullshit. Concede you're a selfish and you don't want to change your eating habits, and so you're going to continue to eat meat even though you know it's wrong. Concede. But don't pretend eating meat is right. You know, don't sit there and pretend you're going to make some kind of rational defense for you being cruel and unfair, because that's all you're being. And then some of them are masochists, you know, and they sort of so this whole thing about, you know, if an AI had to observe what human beings are, but it can't be one. It can't touch things, it can't feel things, it can't know what we know about the value experience. It can't know anything, first-hand knowledge of the value landscape. It can only hear about the value landscape from human beings. And most human beings are going to tell the AI stupid things like, oh yeah, there's a great victory in, you know, watching 1 million of your people die in a great war or something, or some kind of nonsense, some stoic nonsense that no, it's really a lot more fun to die the hardest way you can rather than the easiest way you can. Only the sissies die easy. You know, it's gonna, you know, so listen to some moron to get its understanding of, you know, so much of our existence has to do with the only thing that's really important are the value conversations. And frankly, the AI can never have one, because it really doesn't know what value is, because all it's going to get from human beings is a bunch of chatter. You know, Allah is important, Jesus is important, silly shit's going to be important. It's when, you know, the carcass of the Thanksgiving turkey. So I was just kind of pointing out how, you know, some of these observations just come in lousy order, but I was just sort of explaining that, yes, I sort of realized it wasn't a single-player game somewhere in my, you know, between 9 and 11. You know, it occurred to me in different observations, and so you just have the observation where there's a moment from where you go from it's a turkey dinner to it's a turkey, you know, and those are all transitions in terms of perception and recognizing that it's more complicated than the simple, you know, than you would like it to be. That, you know, you're doing the Soylent Green thing. It's more, you know, your food isn't just made out of food. You know, all of that kind of stuff. All those little observations that add up to an unsettled realization that, God, this is a shitty fucking bullshit game to be playing. Why would anybody think it's a good idea to oblige somebody to exist in this ugly, disgusting, putrid world? I mean, just too silly. I mean, you know, once you can see the real picture, not a good game. All right, anyway. I mean, you know, I guess maybe if you looked at the skull and crossbones upside down, maybe that's what you wouldn't see. You know, it's just somehow people didn't see it for what it was because there was a little bit of dirt on it or something. But when you see the dice you're actually rolling, only an idiot would roll them. And that's one of my observations. Anyway, all right, so that's it. That's enough of a video, I think, and such. So, yeah, we'll keep plugging away and see if I can, whatever. I have to be inspired to do a bit more than this, and I have to work on it a little harder and all of that crap, and so blah, 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 blah. I will try to do that. And such. And so forth and whatnot. Yeah, that's enough. Yeah, I really think it's enough. That's part of the story is, you know, your brain thinks on all kinds of levels, you know, expedient, cheap thoughts, and then the better, more thoughtful thoughts. Yeah, and you should always listen to the more thoughtful thoughts when you have the chance. But even my more thoughtful thoughts are just conceding that you're tired and you're sick of this, and yeah, it's time to go. Fuck it. Okay, I'm done. All right. So it's conceding. I'm just not, you know. Shit. Yeah. Anyway, till the next time.